but I'm going to turn this over to Rocco Rossi, our fearless leader and, a very important leader in the disability community and inclusion as well. So, Rocco, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Thank you, Lisa. And please, we've got to keep the lying to a minimum. I'm not an important leader in this space.
Recording in progress.
You and Louis and the incredible Discoverability Network are the real leaders. And it's one of the reasons I'm so incredibly proud to be the president and CEO of the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. So thanks to all for gathering today. We meet in cyberspace, but it is incredibly important to acknowledge that all of us are connected to the land and water somewhere in Turtle Island, and must acknowledge that these are traditional territories of many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people who have stewarded the lands and waters for generations. I'm coming to you today from the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Chippewa and Wendat peoples, and many other First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. And particularly with the latest revelations from Williams Lake, the latest discoveries in a series of discoveries that remind us of the open wound at the heart of our country that seeks to be great, but that path to greatness requires the path to truth and reconciliation. And we reaffirm our commitment to redouble our efforts to get there. We are here, as you know, on Bell Let's Talk Day, and it is so incredibly important that we talk about these issues. And the work that Bell and so many others have done to raise the profile and reduce the stigma that stands in the way of real action on something that is so debilitating and so widespread in our society is crucial and welcome. But we must also remind ourselves that talking about it isn't enough. And yes, here we're at a session to talk about it, but it's to talk about it to stimulate action. Because while it's Bell Let's Talk Day, let's also make it hashtag Canada Let's Act Day. And to that end, I also want to encourage you to look at our website, occ.ca, and have a look at the incredible toolkit we have for businesses to get on the path to action starting today. I am so delighted to be able to introduce to you our incredible keynote speaker. Justine Fedak, and this is interesting because there's no tie-dye or Grateful Dead music playing in the background, is a self-declared corporate hippie. Now, she is currently the Chief Marketing Officer at Merge. This is an agency that partners with clients to promote health, wealth, and happiness. She was the former Chief Brand Strategist at Polera Strategic Insights.
Oh, I tell you, it's something else. But plan it out. Get Patrick behind
Excuse me.
you and say, Patrick,
could we ask people to mute as they join us? So sorry, Rocco.
No trouble. It is Bell Let's Talk Day after all. Justine is also a longtime senior executive with the Bank of Montreal for over 20 years. She is the recipient of multiple awards, including the National Multiple Sclerosis Society's 2013 Woman on the Move from Illinois, the Chicago Business Journal's 2015 the Chicago Sky's 2016 Redefine Possible Women's Leadership Award, and the Eversight Woman of Vision 2021. Please join me in welcoming the incredible corporate hippie, Justine Fedak.
Thank you so much, Rocco. And I have to say that although that the introduction was, of course, extremely generous, I appreciate that so much. And, we did have a few little technical interruptions. I actually loved that. And the reason I love that, and I'm going to take off my signature glasses so they don't reverberate in any of the light, but the reason I love that is because that's exactly what living with a disability is like. There are many interruptions in the things that we often are confronted with. And certainly being diagnosed with MS over 20 years ago, that was definitely a disconnection. For those of you that are not familiar with MS, I mean, it is a demyelinating disorder. It's chronic, it's incurable, and it's something that immediately for many people causes them to feel a level of disconnection and interruption in how they imagine their life would be. Those of us that were born with disabilities have a different experience. But the one experience that I think we all uniformly share is the one of wondering how our disabilities will affect us in the way in which we enter the workforce and navigate our lives. And so what I thought I would do with the time we had today was share with you some of my early experiences, to use my experience with disability and specifically MS as a bit of a backdrop to a conversation. And so, as Rocco mentioned, I have been somebody that has defined myself as a corporate hippie. And why do I say that? Well, I started out in life with parents that divorced early on. My mother was not particularly present in my life. She herself was an adventurer, married. Now I believe she's on her 6th or possibly 7th marriage. We did not have a traditional type of relationship, and I was raised by my father. In the early 70s, a young person raised by their father was often imagined to have lost their mother to death. And so in a way, maybe it was a kind of death to be raised in an environment where your father was the one trying to do your hair, trying to help you do things. My father's a very traditional person and infused in me a sense of discipline that I think really did help me navigate later in life as things happened. But I grew up in a very non-traditional environment in some ways, but with a lot of tradition. And those things anchored me and grounded me. I grew up in Hamilton, Burlington area. And so that, I'm not too far from Toronto. And so grew up in Ontario, very much a part of Ontario, was very much a part of life in Canada. And now I'm a dual citizen. So that's why all that Chicago stuff in the introduction. But I still span the border. And the early days of my life spent in Ontario, I know all the jingles. So I naturally fell into marketing after many years because I knew every TV commercial, including I can probably sing from, the 70s right through to all the commercials promoting Ontario. And why do I bring that up early on? Because there's a lot to be proud of in the environments that we grow up in. And I was certainly somebody that normalized my environment, as unorthodox and as unusual as it may have been, and with the challenges I had. Went to high school, enjoyed a reasonably successful high school environment, fell in love with my high school sweetheart, continued on through university. He proposed to me on my 21st birthday. Everything was planned, organized. I knew how it was going to be, when all of a sudden he dies in a car crash 3 weeks after. And this shock really changed me. I've often wondered, how that affected my whole constitution. But I went on and continued to, finish that University of Toronto just barely, because it was a very obviously difficult time. And then went on for, challenging myself, thinking I was going to go to law school. Couldn't do it anymore. That had been part of a plan, felt very shaken by that, and was offered an opportunity at Bank of Montreal. Was offered an opportunity to join in a administrative position. This was nothing that I had planned. So already I understand that much of my planned life was being eroded. And maybe that was preparation for the larger diagnosis that I was to receive. But I immersed myself because I was very lost as a human being. Those of us that have experienced that kind of shock, we do sort of check out of some of the things that we're expected to do. And I really became immersed in my career. And so this became my lifeline. I really enjoyed learning about marketing, advertising, research. I absolutely took to everything at BMO. And BMO was very early on breaking the glass ceiling. So I had a lot of female leaders. BMO was interested in talking about diversity and inclusion before those words were part of the dialogue. And so for me, that authenticity that was there, that I was still questioning, but was there, I was able to tap into in different places and build deep relationships with friends that are still my friends today. So early on, I saw the seeds being sown of something, but I was not totally sold on it. As I continued to, grow in the ranks, receive great mentorship, have terrific opportunities, sponsors, leaders, just as I reached the point of, wow, I can feel this, I can see this. I saw this opportunity to join more senior positions, to have more complex opportunities. I was on a trip with our then CEO, Bill Down. He's now retired. Before he was retired, he he always felt that I was giving him far too much credit. But now that he's retired, I told him that all bets are off, and that his name is going to be attached to what he deserves for people to hear. He and I were traveling to New York after 9/11. Those of you that do remember 9/11 clearly remember that the world really stopped. And so it was a big deal when the World Economic Forum, which is normally in Davos, Switzerland, moved in solidarity to New York. And so he and I were traveling to New York. I was basically his sort of chief of staff at the time. And I had all the briefing material, and I had all the excitement that someone would have, thinking, here I am, I'm going to go to this unbelievable place. I'm going to experience, this world leadership. I'm going to have a chance to help create this. And this was for me a very important trip. And as we arrived in New York, we had a very short period of time before our first obligation. And he said to me, listen, we've got 30 minutes, go upstairs. And the event was much more formal. And he said, let's change, and we'll meet down in the lobby. Now, for those of you that are old enough to remember, before Spanx, there were Donna Karen's support hose. Now, this is going to make sense to you when I finish this. Right now, you're saying, where is this woman going? But I had these very tight stockings on. And many people that have worn tight stockings, male or female, will know that those tight stockings really constrict you. And I actually thought, my gosh, as I could no longer feel the bottom of my foot on the left side, I thought these stockings have actually constricted my blood flow. They're so tight. And I thought, I'll just remove them. I'll quickly take a hot bath, and then I'll be refreshed. Well, little did I know that I was having my first exacerbation, that the heat of the water was going to accelerate it. And by the time I put my clothing on to meet him in the lobby, I could barely walk. Now, I only had, of course, 4-inch heels, because why would you not only bring high-heeled shoes? And so I had no practical shoes, no time to do anything. I jammed my foot in. And as all young and aspiring people do, I absolutely concealed the fact that I was not feeling well. So I thought, great, we're probably going to jump into some sort of taxi and head to the event. But lo and behold, he said, you know what, I need some fresh air. Let's walk a couple blocks. Now, that totally terrified me. We did not know each other that well at the time, but I said, I hope this isn't too familiar, and you don't mind if I grab your arm, because I could not feel the bottom of my foot. So off we went. And it's January, so it's a little bit icy. And luckily I'm clinging on to him and off we go. And before you know it, we're there. And I can slowly feel the loss of feeling creeping up my leg. Let's suffice it to say that over the course of the next 24 to 48 hours, I lost all feeling in the left side, right up into my arm. I started to feel that something was probably not right with my bladder. I was overwhelmed by the sense of something being tremendously wrong. And that's when I disclosed to him, I think there's something wrong. And he could not believe that I wouldn't have told him sooner. Now, in my heart of hearts, I felt like this was my big career moment, that I had worked so hard, that I really wanted to prove myself, and something was wrong. And I didn't even know how chronic the condition would be and how it was going to challenge me going forward. But I flew back to Toronto to St. Mike's Hospital. I was triaged and immediately taken in. By this point, I'm totally paralyzed on the left side. And I'm being told this: you have one of four things: a mass in your brain, a tumor in your spine, lupus, or MS. Now, I'll be totally honest with you. The first three sounded very tough to me. The fourth one, MS, I didn't know what it was. And so in my mind, I said, okay, I'll take that one. If this is my fate, because a lot of things had happened to me in my life that felt like, okay, these are out of my control. This is my fate, I'll take it. And so I said, okay, I'll take the MS. And the doctors looked at me and said, it's not an a la carte menu. And I said, well, that's the one. So I continued through a number of different tests, and St. Mike's Hospital was absolutely amazing, truly an urban angel. Although they had to deliver me some very difficult news, it was delivered to me very quickly. Now, I will say at the time, and this is going back over 20 years, the diagnosis was very macabre. It was very dark. And I was told basically that you're probably not going to walk again. It's important for you to, accept that your life is going to change completely. Now, when I reflect back on those words, I will tell you that my life did change completely. That I had a really difficult time accepting and integrating my disability into how I had imagined my life to be. I found it difficult to see others doing things that I could no longer do, or see others doing things that I felt I would want to do. And it took me a very long time to be open with my colleagues, with my family, with my friends, even though the really aspiring and incoming CEO had been with me and was at my side the entire time. So although senior people in the company were aware, I forbid them from sharing it with anybody else for fear that I would be judged as not capable, as not strong enough. And I'll tell you when I changed my mind about disclosing and about being open. So the bank had transferred me to Chicago somewhere around 97, 98. And so I had a cross-border job that I continued. There was a period of time where it was harder for me to travel, but I will say BMO was very accommodating to support me. So one of my jobs was I negotiated big sports sponsorships with a lot of the teams like the Raptors, the Leafs, Toronto FC. So BMO Field obviously would make sense, and the Chicago Bulls. And the reason I say and the Chicago Bulls is one of the games, which was a Christmas Day game, my daughter at the time was quite young, and I had had a very bad exacerbation, and I was having a very hard time walking, and I had never gone out in public with a cane. I used to just stay in during the periods of time where I was as immobile, or really limit my being with other people. And she really wanted to go to the Christmas Day game, and I did not have a cane, and I'd had this flare up. And so got a cane from the Shoppers Drug Mart in the US, which is called Walgreens. And I went to the game. And when I walked out on the court, one of my best friend's sons played on the team. So if you follow basketball, Joakim Noah's mom, Cecilia, is one of my dear best friends and has been a big support to me through these many years. So when I walked out on the court, of course, he knew that I had multiple sclerosis, but none of the other players did. I was very involved with the team in many different ways. And as I walked out, all the players started coming up to me during the shoot around and saying, hey, What happened? Did you have a car accident? Are you okay? Did you have some sort of accident? Did you have a hip replacement? And then people that I worked with on the team said, hey, what happened? And Michael Reinsdorf, the president of the team, said, hey, what happened? Like, are you okay? And in that moment, I didn't know how to answer anybody anymore. All these things they were asking me. And I finally said, well, actually, I have multiple sclerosis. And he said, wait a minute, did this just happen? And I said, no, I've had it for 8 years. And he said, what? But we're such close friends and I've known you for so long. I can't believe you wouldn't have shared this with me so that I could be there to support you. And in that moment, I have to be honest with all of you, I felt so like I betrayed everyone that I was close to, that I was actually hiding something so important about myself. And so it all happened in this very short period of time. And that day that I started telling people, they made me feel comfortable about myself by sharing stories of other people they knew with similar situations, by telling me stories about things in their life that had been very difficult for them to share. And all of a sudden I had this outpouring of love and support and connection. And I felt more connected and comfortable with myself than I ever had before. So I slowly started talking. And before you knew it, everywhere I went that I shared this, more and more people connected to me. And then the very generous introduction that Rocco did, those awards are not truly awards. Those are recognitions for acting. He said, let's talk, let's stimulate action. Those are recognitions for acting, for stepping up and saying, this is who I am, and this is what I do, and this is what I feel, and this is how I try to live my life. And each and every time I did it, it became that much easier, to the point where now I am known as the girl with MS. I'm a big advocate for people with disabilities. I'm absolutely a voice to say, give this person a chance. And it's less about your disability. And in my mind, it's more about each one of us accepting ourselves for who we are and how we want to be perceived. So for me, my disability has been a very important gift for me to accept myself with all of my insecurities, with all of my vulnerabilities, with all of my strengths. And I believe that had I not had that moment of reckoning where people looked me in the eye and said, like, what? You didn't trust me enough to be there for you. And I do think that there are times along the way that I have certainly felt people question my capability because of my mobility issues, or because that they worry, might I have cognitive issues? And I have had all those things along the way. I will tell you that I started speaking out after the first award, where I gave a speech, and that speech led to people calling my assistant at the time and saying, could she come and tell her story to our corporation? And I kept saying, what story? I don't have a story. What's my story? So I watched my own speech that I gave at that 2013 Woman on the Move, and I realized, oh, okay, my story is simply sharing my vulnerability. My story is simply opening up about who I am and the challenges I faced, in integrating my disability into who I am, and understanding that my work product hadn't changed. And when I actually did try to quit BMO, Bill Downs sat beside me in my hospital room at St. Mike's and said, Justine, I'm not going to let you quit. And I said, I'm not going to be able to do the job anymore. I'm not going to be able to do the traveling. I can barely walk. I can barely move. I can barely handle this. I'm in so much pain. I'm totally doubting myself. And he said, Justine, let me tell you something. Nothing about you has changed. You feel different, but you're the exact same person. Nothing about you has changed. Your work product is exactly the same. I'm not going to let you quit, but I'll give you the time to figure this out. Now, giving me the time to figure it out lasted about 7 seconds, because then he started talking to me about work. Had he not done that at the time, I may not have believed in myself anymore. I also really felt that after the first time I spoke out, for me, a room full of people stood up and clapped. And I wondered why that they were clapping for something that to me did not seem inspirational, did not seem like a superpower. I felt like every day that I got up and that I did something that challenged me was another day that I was putting, and for me, that was my own little triumphs. So I would say to you that there have been many times along the way that I've had to look for inspiration, that I've said, I can't do this today, or this is too hard for me, or I'm starting to question the way somebody interacted with me. Am I really good enough? Am I really? And I think that we sometimes in a disability community hold ourselves to a much higher standard than everybody else, because everybody has those moments of vulnerability. And when I speak to large groups of not our community, but the broader community, I'm often amazed at how they relate to my own stories. And when I talk about the fact that I often look for inspiration, and that I look for that inspiration, and I have life's mottos that have really fueled me. I have two, and I'll share them with you. So the first one is Jack Kerouac, if those of you that remember the novel On the Road. So Jack Kerouac said, be in love with your life every single minute. And for me, it's a way that I've really committed to myself. I actually have military time on my phone, a 24-hour clock. And I love to say to myself, what have I done today? How have I lived my best day today in that 24 hours? And so being in love with your life every single minute helps me to make sure that I am not wasting a single moment of my day. The second sort of life's motto is Bob Marley. So I don't know how many of you in this conversation today are big Bob Marley fans, but one of my favorite songs is Redemption Song. And I absolutely love when he says, free yourselves from mental slavery, only ourselves can free our minds. So these two mottos fuel me when I need that extra boost. Now, I'm going to let you guys in on a little bit of a secret. I just told you that I live my life based on these two mottos. And I also want to just let you know that both of those guys were completely stoned their entire lives. So I've just shared with you that I've actually modeled my life after two guys that were completely high for most of their lives. But having said that, and all kidding aside, really, it reminds me of how much of our own journey is our acceptance of ourselves. So for me, our community benefits when we see ourselves as able to do all the things we want to do. And I say we want to do because to hold yourself accountable to something that is somebody else's wish for you is not living a free life. So as a corporate hippie, the one emancipation I gave myself was to be myself 100%, whatever that meant. If that's talking about meditation, if that's talking about sometimes the feelings of being overwhelmed, if that's authentically just being me in all my weirdness, in all my strength, in all my weakness, in all my vulnerability, I have been much healthier of mind, body, and spirit by just simply talking about myself to myself and with others openly. I'm certainly not suggesting, and one of the number one questions I get from either people that are introduced to me that might be going through a tough time, newly diagnosed, or also just part of the larger community after I speak, is often, should I disclose? And my answer to that is, if you're ready to. You may never feel ready to, and that's okay. You may be ready to right now and haven't not done it. But it is really a process that only you can undergo and only you will know. I can tell you for me personally, integrating and accepting my disability and all that comes with it enabled me to be an advocate, to share my story, and to be open at work. And what I have seen in my position as an executive leader and a leader of many DEI groups is that when we open up and share, it enables others to open up and share with us, whether it's about themselves, their families, or other things they're struggling with, that they may find strength in how we persevere. I still question words like inspirational, motivational, because I simply think that the more we accept ourselves and integrate ourselves into our daily lives, into our work lives, into our hopes and dreams, we're just living our best life. So for me, a vital life is my personal best life. I judge myself against my own criteria. So there have been times where getting up and standing up was something to celebrate, and other times where, you know, major accomplishments being acknowledged felt just as good. And so for me today, I want to share with you, and then I know we're going to open it back up to questions and more of an interactive dialogue, I hope. I would just encourage you to accept yourself first. Start with that. And what we radiate inward to ourselves is what radiates out. I don't know how many of you have ever listened to or been exposed to Wayne Dyer, but in one of his talks, he says something that I find so beautiful. He says, what happens when you squeeze an orange? And of course, we all say, well, you get orange juice. Now, what happens when you squeeze someone? You get out what they have inside. So for me, I live a very corporate hippie, I am love. I try to radiate that sense of love and connection and hope and faith and commitment and strength, so that those things around me will radiate those energies. And I know there are barriers that we have to get through, and I know that there are challenges that we have to partner on. I am committing and acting, as Rocco asked today, to start that journey with you and to give you that support to start with just you. Our belief in ourselves translates so much on the subconscious. People feel strength. When I joined Polera, and so some of you may know Don Guy, when he approached me and said, would you like to be part of this organization? You know, he knew that I had a disability. And I said, like, are you sure that you want me to be part of your organization? Because it's the first time that I hadn't been with BMO. I spent most of my career at BMO. And he said, well, why wouldn't I? And I said, well, because I'm, you know, I've got, you know, an illness. And he said, oh, are you not feeling well? And I said, no, I'm talking about multiple sclerosis. He said, oh, no, that's fine. And in that moment, I thought, wait, does he not understand that I have multiple sclerosis? Does this not matter? And I actually realized it mattered more to me as my own concern that maybe I would be perceived as not capable. And look how quickly I wrote off all of the accomplishments I'd ever had over all my years at BMO. That to me, those things on a resume meant nothing. Those things that I'd actually done and committed to and worked so hard on, in that moment, suddenly melted away. And I felt that none of it mattered. And that's why I leave you with this thought, that the stronger we feel about ourselves and the more we see our own abilities, capabilities, and our strengths, I believe the easier it will be for those around us to give us those opportunities and chances. And so I am very committed and very grateful to the province of Ontario for the kind of advocacy that I see going on. And I would like to do my part to make sure that our voices are heard and that those opportunities are given. So consider me your partner and your support as we all continue down this path. Thank you. I think we'll have time for some questions and some interactive dialogue.
Justine, I just want to say what a pleasure it has been to hear your story. You know, it's inspiring. It's incredible. You've given us so much to think about, you know, that maybe we just don't reflect enough. You know, when I was listening to you, I'm thinking, you know, what a wonderful thing to take that time and do that reflection about who we are, accepting ourselves, you know, trying not to be something that we aren't. I think truly, truly, truly inspiring. You know, trying to live your personal best life. I've never heard that described that way before, but it's something that I know will resonate with me for a long, long time, and hopefully most of the participants here today, because that is a great way to describe it. That personal, I would just want to say it again, our personal best life. You know, and what does it mean to us, and what does it mean for people that we work with, and our colleagues and our friends and our families and our community? I think, you know, very, very, very nicely said. Again, I can't say how much I enjoyed your talk today, and I will be reflecting more. I guarantee this, absolutely, after your inspirational comments today.
No, I'm so glad.
Oh, no, I'm going to have to start to follow you. I'm not a Twitter person or a Facebook person, but maybe I might just start following you. Okay, I'm going to have to get my friend Lisa to teach me how to do this, because I'm a little older, right? So I never bought into the social media stuff yet. But I got to tell you, I might have to start to follow you, because the words were truly, truly, they resonate. They truly resonated. But I'm going to start off, Justine, with one question. The first question, maybe, and then we'll turn it over to the audience. You know, you talked about being authentic, and you talked a little bit about, you know, self-disclosure, right? So can you just maybe elaborate on how being authentic really fosters more openness and more deeper connections in your environment?
I mean, I'll answer that in a couple of ways. I think that the best ways that I have found for me to foster these deeper relationships is to be very, very open. And so for me, it's, you know, and I'll talk about my recent role at Merge. Okay. So I'm the chief marketing officer at an agency that I didn't think I was going to stop sort of more of a consulting life. I thought, you know, I had the career, maybe it's time to sort of do very different things. And I left BMO because I'd been there 27 years. And I thought, boy, if I don't leave now, I'll stay forever, because it's a family. I'm so comfortable. And I wanted to push myself into new things. I wrote a kid's book. I did all kinds of things that just for me, I thought I need to do this and test myself. And so as part of that, I was put in contact with this opportunity to be chief marketing officer for Merge. And I'll be honest with you, the lunch with the CEO, and this is how I think I connect. I shared with him, listen, I need to tell you something. And I was very nervous to say it to him, very different than Don Guy, who I'd known a long time. I basically said, I have multiple sclerosis, and I just want you to know that, because I'm not sure if that's going to be an issue for you or not. And I looked him in the eye, and he said, why on earth would that be an issue for me? And I said, well, because I mean, I do have a disability. And I said, but I felt that the whole purpose of merging storytelling and technology to promote health, wealth, and happiness spoke to me. I said, your cultural material says ability, agility, humility. And those words for me, Louis, the ability, agility, and humility, it's almost like it struck a chord in my heart. And I thought, this is who I am. And I realized in that moment that when I'm just living my daily life and talking to people, and they would see my cane, or they would talk to me about something, and I would share even stories as personal as how hard it used to be to sit in a meeting and knowing you had to go to the restroom because my bladder would be acting up. And it got to the point where I started to be so funny and use humor and say, guys, I gotta, like, this meeting, you can keep talking, I gotta use the restroom. Or advocating in different situations saying, people can't see this font, it's not accessible. You know, and I would say, so we're going to have to figure that out. Just connecting to say, are you aware of the fact that this event has no seating? And, you know, there were times where again, humor led the way for me to connect and foster relationships. I would fall a lot. So I'd have a lot of, you know, really unfortunate bruises, and I would slip and fall. And I mean, sometimes my entrance would be quite memorable. And so I would make a joke, and not to belittle myself, but just because if you can't laugh at your own circumstances, sometimes it's very hard to live in your body. And so, I think that I try to foster relationships by being on two levels. So I think we all know we have those of us, like right now, we're here, we're participating, we know we're at this session. But there's the other part of us that's observing us participating in this session. So there's a duality we all experience that's hard to put into words. And that's part of that reflection you mentioned, Louis, that I see myself, I'm observing myself, and I am myself all the time. I'm a big time meditator. And for me, that allows me to sometimes let the administrative part of me that's super active all the time take a break. And it's that other self that sometimes needs the connection. That's where the fostering the relationships comes from, is deeply feeling one another. Like, so that even though we're virtual, I feel you and you feel me. And all of us today have shared this energy we've built together. And I think that that's really important to, share ourselves with each other, even on the subconscious level. Just by being here, you've committed and given yourself that gift of reflection. Taking that time for you is so important, so important.
It's a lesson that we could all learn from, no doubt about that. And I have many more questions, Justine.
Okay.
Thank you for that. But I'm going to go to the chat board here.
Yeah, for sure.
Get a question from one of the participants. So it's along the lines of, what's your favorite way to partner with individuals in the community, and how has that changed through the pandemic?
Yeah. So I have a couple of, I'd say, favorite ways. So I probably each week have, some weeks more than others, but people just refer to me. Sometimes it's through LinkedIn or friends that I know, and they say, this person really needs someone to talk to. So one of my favorite ways is just that one-on-one mentorship, which I do a lot of. Another favorite way is, becoming active in different organizations where I'm learning. So whether those are, disability oriented or other civic or, philanthropic groups, I try to stay very active so that also I'm bringing a voice of people with disabilities to the table, and I'm helping to have conversations. So sometimes I join things that, maybe some others might shy away from, simply because I want to bring that perspective and I want for our voices not to be forgotten. And so some of that is being active in places that may not always be comfortable, but those are places that I tend to enjoy. I've not had a totally comfortable life, so I'm actually wired for that kind of incongruence, and I like to bring harmony and congruence to those spaces. So I joke, I'm just a girl that can't say no, because if you invite me to come to something, I'll go. I'm curious. I'd say being curious about how people perceive us is sort of my superpower. I love to hear people's perceptions, even if they can be somewhat hurtful to me. I take them as, oh, that's interesting. I want to dispel that, or I want to challenge that, or I want to ask about that and learn about that.
Well, thank you. Now that you said that, you can't say no, we're going to have to invite you back.
I hope you will.
In fact, I was talking to some of the team this morning, and we were talking about what's next on the horizon for us. So your name will stay with us as we plan that next event. Next question here is, how do you think that different disabilities evoke different responses? And how does that perhaps, affect some of the champions?
Yeah, totally. That's a great question. So one of the challenges that I was met with is I didn't look disabled enough for some people. And I say that, in the safety of this community, that, my disability was non-visible unless I have a mobility device. And so there are different challenges for people that have a non-visible disability than a more visible one. And I would say that focusing again on ability, and I think I saw in the chat, because Hamilton, I love Hamilton. So, the city of Hamilton, shout out to you. I think that talking openly about our ability is important. And so in the circumstances where, people are being, and I don't know if the word is correct to say, but being limited or that again, people may perceive. I mean, I have had with my cane, which I found always very peculiar. And many people on this chat will say, oh no, I have that all the time. People think that you can't function cognitively when you have a mobility device. And I would find that, I'm a professional, I've air traveled a lot for work. I mean, I'm like a road warrior. When I'm walking with my cane, people would actually try to help me understand how the airport works. So the assumption was, I have a mobility device, so therefore I must not be a business person. Like, you could see the connection of the dots. And so I think that we do have to create more images out there of all the different kinds of individuals that contribute to our society and the many ways we do, because there are stereotypes. And so certainly, my disability being non-visible, my disability being MS is one type of disability. We have so many. And so where is that thread that I could say gives us the consistency is, again, it's accepting ourselves and sharing to help people learn. It can be easy to fall to a negative place, but when people talk to me about things that are difficult sometimes to hear, I say, what is my role in this? How can I participate in providing some education? And how can I ask questions to educate myself?
When you talk about like preconceived notions, I think sometimes too that might also stem from, our age demographic. Because I'll take myself as an example, right? I grew up in in where the symbol for disability was like the wheelchair,
right?
So when I think of disabilities, if I'm not careful, I immediately move to, in my mind, a physical disability. And we know that many disabilities are invisible. They're unseen, right? So
Yes.
it's really important. Again, I'm going to go back to your word of reflection. It's really about reflecting on what we're seeing around us, what we're seeing in our workplaces, what we're seeing in our community, and don't just accept everything at face value as we absorb that information. Really try to unpack it a little bit so we have a better understanding of how we can help and support.
And I do think it's important. There's something you said that really connected for me, that I don't know everything about disability. I know about my personal own disability for me, but we don't all know everything about disability, even as members of our own community. We share that word that brings us together, and how beautiful that we have a way of coming together and creating community. So community is what we make of it. And whenever I'm speaking uniquely to a community of people that consider themselves part of a disability community, I learned so many things. And so I come into it very open, and again, with that humility. So that's why I said, like, merge appealed to me, ability, agility, humility. That to me, that humility of saying, I know my story and I'm sharing my story as hopefully a reflection for people to see and hear something about themselves, that you'll take away some tiny thing for you. But I also, in the exchange, learned so much about others. And so I come into everything very open and saying, I don't know about this. And I think if we could all open up to saying, I don't know about this, and people don't know about me, then it's much easier to exist in our world.
Absolutely. I'm going to go to another question here from the chat line. How do you think workplaces can make more inclusive environments for people with disability?
I think a lot of it starts with awareness. So again, disability is defined so many different ways, and awareness is the number one opportunity. So sharing what is disability, and then helping people understand what does that mean in the workplace and how do we relate to one another. So I know that many times I've been in different roles where, I may have said something and someone will say to me, do you realize that could have been perceived this way? And I said, no, but thank you for telling me. So it's again, also helping leadership understand about their own journey, helping all individuals working together understand that we're all learning. So it's again, that starting with awareness. What does it mean to have a disability, and what are disabilities? So as you said, many people think a disability is a physical accommodation, and it can be, right? And certainly those are things that we have to advocate for, but it's many, many things. And those accommodations are just as broad as the spectrum of disability.
And you know, when we talk about the employment environment, and maybe you could comment on this, I've heard that it's something that we need to integrate. Our inclusiveness needs to be integrated into our daily routines. It can't be something that we bolt on. So maybe you could speak a little bit about that. You know, if I'm building a house, right, I'd rather have all the plans in place as opposed to trying to figure out later where am I going to put my windows. So if you could speak to that, kind of making it part of your daily routines and your operating environment in a workplace.
Yeah, I mean, for me, again, Lee, it comes back to that having a kind of curiosity that comes from your heart, that you're saying, I'm interested to learn every day about how I can more deeply connect with the world around me, whatever that may be. And many times for me, because of my mobility, I would have to sit down places. And oftentimes I was seated beside very elderly people who were also having trouble moving around. And so I learned so much talking to people I would have never otherwise sat down beside, right? Because I would have been so busy and moving in every direction. And I've often thought, was this slowing me down a gift for me to take time to figure out who I am? And so I do think that it does come down to that, have curiosity and connection, and try to understand who you are within your community and how can you foster community. So it's not just being a part of the community, it's how do you foster the philosophical essence of community. So today we're doing that through coming together and listening and sharing questions and participating. And so how can we participate every day? And what is that one small thing we'll do for inclusivity? And inclusivity might be saying, oh, hey, Louie, would you like to, talk about this? Or, hey, Louie, I haven't asked you about how you're doing today. It's even just the smallest gesture. So I think sometimes because legislation and because policy and, a lot of corporate information has made diversity, equity, equality, inclusion, these kinds of things, sometimes we lose our humanity in that. So we need all of that. We need legislation and we need advocacy and we need policy and we need laws to enforce things. But we also need to be sure that as human beings, we're fostering the humanity of community, right? Otherwise, it does become, we need this, this, and this. Well, then you're losing, why do you need it? And we need it so that all of these talented people today that have joined this are being given the same opportunities that others are being given, or that they believe they have the same opportunities.
And in an employment environment, it really is about getting the best out of everyone there, making sure that your environment allows people to achieve to the best of their ability. And that's really creating that inclusive environment, that openness. I was talking to some companies a little while back, and we talked about this whole notion of inclusivity. It's one thing to be inclusive. It's another thing to celebrate that inclusivity.
Yes.
Because then people will come forward. People will talk about some of the things that they need support for. So maybe if you could speak a little bit about kind of celebrating being an inclusive organization.
Yeah, that's a wonderful topic. So one of the things that I think we don't do enough of is when you've embedded certain flexible environment and you've created the appropriate accommodations and you've got a community in your workplace that is enabling people, all people, to come and give their best selves and feel very much connected to the mission, that does need to be celebrated both internally and externally. Internally, so that you grow your culture, that people do feel accepted, that those people that may be a little more silent know that they're very welcome and that they are part of the larger community. And then also externally, so that those that may be looking for an environment like yours know that you're there. And I mean, that's something that I would say is critically important. We don't celebrate ourselves or our environments to the degree we should. And that's why I'm saying there were days where I was like, good for you, girl. You got out of the bed. You made it to the restroom. You took a shower. All right, go back to bed. Right. So, I mean, there are small triumphs and there are big triumphs, but every one of them deserves acknowledgement, both by you and those around you. So, you know, that's something that for me, one of the things that I learned, because I'm not so good at this, but at Merge, they have work where you work best. So work where you work best means you don't have to come into the office. You don't have to do this. Work where you work best. Work where you work best 10 years ago did not exist. And so work where you work best, I think, is also allowing us to create environments in our homework environment that may be better suited to some of our skill sets, right? And so in some cases it may not, because you don't want to be home any longer and we're all ready to go and see the world again. But it's, again, looking at the situation you're in and making the best of it. And that's why I'm saying that the many difficult circumstances that I've been served up in my life, the one thing that my grandfather, so I don't know if anybody on this call is Ukrainian. I grew up in a very Ukrainian environment, and my grandfather was the Metropolitan of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church and a spiritual leader. And he used to always say to me, you have to make the best of the situation you're in.
So Justine,
right?
I'll say this word to you when you mentioned Ukrainian.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, it's an inside joke, right? My wife is Ukrainian. Right?
Oh.
So, you know, so I had to learn to eat kucha, right? Because that's the traditional food during certain holidays, right? Christmas and New Year. Yeah, so I'm really well versed in, you know, cabbage rolls and pierogi. And what we did is we blended an Italian background and a Ukrainian background. So you can imagine the food that we have is pretty good.
It's pretty good. Yes,
pretty good.
Definitely. Definitely.
Maybe one last question, you know, and I'm looking at the chat here, and it's, you know, because it's Bell Let's Talk Day, can you maybe talk a little bit about the intersection between mental health and perhaps some other disabilities?
Yeah, I think that Bell Let's Talk Day is so important, because we still are in a society that I'm not sure people understand mental health, first of all, to be a disability, but also to be something that needs to be understood for what it is. And oftentimes people use words that in the mental health community have so much more impact, power, and consideration that needs to be taken. And it's become part of our vernacular in a casual way. And I think that makes things very difficult for people that live with disabilities within the mental health community. It's extremely important for all of us in the broader disability community to not forget that mental health is so much a part of that. The accommodations and the support people may need in various groups is very different. And again, our sensitivity to advocate for everyone is important. I think Bell Let's Talk Day and the many corporations in Ontario that really make this a priority is just having that awareness again, top of mind, to remind people that many of the disability issues that people wrestle with day to day are in the mental health community, but that there are ways to help support people. There are ways to provide accommodation. There are ways to include everyone. And I think that comes back to your point, Louis, that inclusion is really what we're trying to do. You know, awareness starts like in the marketing funnel. If there's any marketers, you know, it's awareness leads to consideration. Once you have consideration, then you have the chance to make a sale. What we're trying to sell here is that our community is very diverse, is very different, includes all kinds of people of all ages, from all places, in all different formats, you know, with different passions and different needs. And so I think that, again, that openness and that dialogue to help articulate that my need might be different than your need, might be different from what Lisa might need. But we're all part of this same community that wants what? To be heard and to be understood. And that's all that all human beings want. We want to be seen, we want to be heard, we want to be understood. And so for me, you know, there's some simple things that come down to, again, kindness. let's just really be kind to one another. And certainly nobody's ever been hurt by saying, I'm sorry, I don't understand. Can you please explain that to me?
Kindness never hurt anybody.
And that is such a great note to end this day on. Louis, thank you so much. Justine, that was incredible. There is so much great feedback in the chat. I'm going to let everybody know that we'll be sharing this out. We'll be adding it to our YouTube. We will arrange for closed captions to be added for those of you that were had difficulty with that today. So thank you to our ASL interpreters from Toronto Sign Language Interpreter Service. They were amazing. We really encourage you to join us, let us know who you want to hear from, what you want to talk about. As somebody in the disability community, I'm really, really pleased, Justine, with your messages, and they are inspiring. I know you don't like that, but really want to thank everybody for coming on today, and let's continue this conversation. Reach out to us at Discoverability Network, part of the OCC, if we can help you in any way to support the hiring of people with disabilities. Thank you, and have a great one.
And congratulations to all of you for the great work. Thank you so much, everyone.